There you go. I'm John Kane, and this is Resistance Radio. I want to thank you for joining me. It is great to be broadcasting here on WBAI in New York City. This show, most of the time, also airs in Washington, D.C. on WPFW radio. But I'm going to do a separate show for them tomorrow as well. So, like last week, I'm going to do two shows this week, one for New York and one for Washington. I'm going to cover some of the same issues because I think I almost have to. For those of you who might be completely unaware, Trump has begun the process of taking over police departments by taking over the DC police and patrolling the city of Washington, D.C. And I bring this up because, look, 35 years ago, today, we were in the middle, and I say we meaning Mohawk people, well, frankly, all Native people, we were in the middle of a 78-day standoff, which started between the local provincial police in Quebec, the SQ they call them, and Mohawks in a native territory we call Gunnasadage, and the township just off that territory is called Oka. Many of you may have heard of the Oka crisis, and if you look it up online, you can find plenty of information about the Oka crisis. I do recommend specifically a film that I screened, I think, several times at the Brooklyn Commons when we were doing that kind of thing, called Gunnasadage, 270 Years of Resistance. Yes, resistance in that title as well. I bring it up because just like the military being deployed in Washington, D.C., we too had an invasion of the Canadian military. After it went from the SQ to the RCMP, which is the federal police on the Canadian side, it turned into a Canadian military exercise. And even though Gunnasadage was where the conflict began, the support that Gunnasadage was getting from another Mohawk territory close by called Gunnawage, which is where my people are from, my family's from, they were lending their support to the folks in Gunnasadage. They blocked one of the major bridges from the south side of Montreal that has part of its bridge on Mohawk territory, on the Gunnawage territory. So they blocked that bridge, and it turned into like I said, a 78-day. The 78 days is a long time. So it was a standoff that started on July 11th. It didn't get over until till late September. I mean, it was it dominated the news cycle on the Canadian side. I got to tell you, it didn't dominate the news cycle here. In fact, it was a 60 minutes attempt to get 60 Minutes involved, and they wouldn't cover it. Their editors and their executives didn't want to cover the fact that the Canadian military was surrounding a small Mohawk territory on the Canadian side. It's actually even mentioned in that Russell Crowe movie. I think it was called The Insider or something like that, about tobacco or something like that. The tobacco executives. I mean, Al Pacino played 60 Minutes executive, and he was talking about how it wouldn't be covered. So it even got mentioned in a major film, but that's the only mention it got. So this whole episode in Gunnasadage started over the town of Oka, the mayor, trying to expand a golf course onto Mohawk lands in Gunnasadage, an area that we called the Pines. And it's an area that not only did it have graveyard in it, but it also had picnic areas. It was a beautiful, beautiful spot with these large pine trees. There was a lacrosse box that was there. It was a significant part of the Gunnasadage community, and it turned into essentially not just a standoff, but a standoff that ultimately resulted in gunfire, where a SQ police officer was struck by a bullet. We can debate whether it was one of ours or one of theirs, but regardless, there was a loss of life there. And this continued to escalate, and it turned into a standoff where there were people who were holed up in Gunnasadage in an area they called the treatment center. And all other native territories were trying to support these guys, and including again, Gunnawage, where my family's from. So at some point, because of the reputation that the Mohawk Warrior Society had, the Canadian military decided they were going to invade Ganawage. They were going to land their troops, and I mean troops, by helicopter and boat onto what was called the Degaguita Island, which is an island that has one bridge that goes through, connects it to the rest of Ganawage to go through the village. But other than that, it's just it's surrounded by water. And so the military came in, and it turned into just an absolute ugly debacle. But our people resisted. Now, I'm saying this, I'm not telling the people of Washington, D.C., or if Trump tries this in New York or Chicago or Baltimore or anybody place else, I'm not telling anybody what to do. What I'm saying is when the military invaded our community, a Mohawk community, our people fought back. We didn't arm ourselves. We didn't get into gunfights with the Canadian military. We went after them physically. And there are plenty of videos, or I posted a few. And basically I said, this is what happens. This is how Mohawks respond to a military invasion to our territory. We fight back. Ultimately, the Canadian military had to evacuate the way they came in. They wanted to come through the village, and our people wouldn't allow it. There was tear gas fire. There was arm to arm, physical man to man combat. I mean, there were my friend Danny Phillips, who has passed away now. There's just a classic image of the big Danny Phillips just hauling back to throw a punch at one of these soldiers, and you can find all the stuff online. Again, you can search Oka Crisis, OKA Crisis. And I do recommend highly the Ganawage 270 Years of Resistance documentary on the subject. I guess I'm saying this because if everybody just complies, then there's nothing to stop Donald Trump. And it doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong, whether what he's doing is legal or not. Slavery was legal. Genocide was legal. Kidnapping our children for 150 years and putting them in residential schools was legal. All that stuff was legal. It doesn't matter if it wasn't right. The problem is law is flawed. Oftentimes they are either inadequate or they just simply aren't enforced. And in the case of Donald Trump, this is a guy who doesn't follow the law and suffers no consequence. Even when he doesn't just not follow, he actually breaks the law. This is like a convicted felon. This is a pedophile. So, to be clear here, there's nothing to stop Donald Trump but the people. So people got to decide, what are you going to do? Look, the name of the show is Resistance Radio. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm just saying, if you want to see an example of Native people resisting a military invasion of a small Native community, we don't have millions of people. I don't know if there was 10,000 people in Ganawage at the time. But I'll tell you, there were people who resisted all across Canada, not so much on the U.S. side. I mean, because there was a media blackout. But there were railroads that were blocked. There were power lines that were toppled. There were bridges and highways that were blocked. All in solidarity to what was happening in Ganawage and ultimately Ganawage. Now, don't get me wrong. The military came in and police came in, and there were people who were roughed up. Even in the village of Ganawage at the Longhouse. If you watch some of these videos, you'll see people talking about that. But ultimately, we stood up and we resisted. Now, the whole conflict ultimately resolved with those individuals at the treatment center essentially surrendering. But this was after there was a lot of negotiations, and the charges essentially were dropped for all intents and purposes. And ultimately, the golf course was never expanded onto our territories. I mean, Canada claimed, well, we bought the land. It wasn't yours to buy. It was ours. But apparently, they must have paid off the village of Oka for whatever their claim was to prevent any further conflict. But I understood that this might be an issue brewing again. I don't know for sure, but that's one of the rumors that was out there. But this was 35 years ago. For those of you who are familiar with some of the work that I've done over the years, I have done the screening of this film, 270 Years of Resistance, Ganawage. It is a matter of the public record. I will say this is a matter of the public record that folks like Donald Trump will try to not let out and will continue to try to block out from a media standpoint. In fact, let me go a step farther, because apparently not only has Donald Trump taken over the DC Metro Police, he is also asserting control. Of course, you know what he did with the Kennedy Center, took that over. But now he's trying to assert control over the Smithsonian Institute, the museums, including the Native American museums. And there's one in New York City and there's one in Washington. Now, it wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what Donald Trump's agenda would be here. Part of it is that he is trying to promote only positive imagery and representations of the United States. I don't know how you have a museum that does that, at least one that involves Native people or black people. I mean, the African American Museum in D.C. cannot whitewash what black people went through, and nor can the Smithsonian. But let me tell you, in large part they have. There used to be a display, and I'm going to talk about this, and I don't know if it's still there now. I haven't been to the museum in Washington in quite a few years, but there was this one room that was filled with exhibits of various nations, U.S. and Canada for that matter. And when you walked in, there was a video wall that you walked by on your left to go in, and then there was a video wall on the right as you walked out, if you went in and out of this room. On the video wall where you're walking in, you could see throngs of Native people look like they're walking in the same direction as you. And they're just, diverse Native people. On the wall walking out, it's Native people in military uniforms. I mean, there could be no greater example of this representation of assimilation than those two video walls at the Smithsonian Museum. So I've been very disappointed oftentimes about the representation that these museums have had of Native people, because they don't address tough subjects. They don't accurately reflect what the residential school issue was. And that's a major part of the history that should be well covered in these museums. Now, I've had decent relationships with the museum in New York City, but I suspect that that's probably not going to continue. If Donald Trump has his way, I guarantee there will not be John Cain events at the museum in New York City, in Brooklyn, or in Manhattan. I just know that it won't happen. I did an event about 6 months ago there on the mascot issue. We know what Donald Trump feels about the mascot issue. In fact, I would suggest that Donald Trump would attempt to interject Washington Redskins issues and the folks out in Long Island who are fighting to keep their native mascot. I say he will use the museums to promote that agenda. And I'm not exaggerating, folks. This is the mentality of this guy who sits in the White House. And who's going to stop him? Look, if the people don't resist this authoritarian rule and this takeover of what should be independent institutions, and let's be honest, they're not. Harvard caved. Columbia has caved. So what chance does the national museums under the name of the Smithsonian Institute, what chance do they have to resist Donald Trump? If institutions as strong and powerful as Harvard can't, there's only one way that these institutions can resist. It's with the people. So again, I'm not telling people what to do. I can't do that. On the airwaves, I cannot create a call to action. I can't, and I won't. But all I'm saying is, if something doesn't happen, if people don't respond in some way to what's happening, this is what we're up against. Now, I want to tell you now, like I said, I do plan to do a show in Washington tomorrow, and I'm going to talk about some of the stuff tomorrow. But I want to get some of your feedback. So I want to do some call-ins. So let me give the studio number. The studio number is 212-209-2877. That's 212-209-2877. I'm interested to hear what what people have to say about both. I mean, because look, Trump has threatened to do to New York what he's doing right now to Washington, to Washington, the city of Washington D.C. He's threatening to do the same thing, and to other cities as well. And if you think Eric Adams is somehow going to resist Donald Trump, he's already caved into the freaking guy. So you're not going to get. I know he's given a few statements and try to puff up his chest a little bit, but this is a guy who's completely sold out to Donald Trump. So I mean, don't think that your mayor is going to save you, because that's not going to happen. So I'm interested to think. I'm interested in what you, the listeners of the show, have to say about what's happening in Washington, what could happen in New York, and I guess, what do people anticipate? I mean, look, there have been Million Man marches on Washington, but there doesn't seem to be one right now. There have been women showing up by the hundreds of thousands into Washington, to protest various issues relating to Trump. But I don't see anything planned now. I did see somebody throw a submarine sandwich at one of the National Guardsmen and then get chased down the street. I don't know if anybody saw that one. Reggie, I don't know if you saw the guy throw the. There was a comment about a hero is only a sandwich. Well, apparently that sandwich became the hero.
Yeah, I saw that. That was hilarious.
Yes. Look, I don't know what the buzz is around New York City right now, but I got to tell you, I also don't know what the buzz is around New York City and Washington D.C. related to the Trump administration trying to alter the representations that museums will have on American history. I mean, I can't imagine that this is going to go over well. I mean, look, we've done a lot. We've forced the takedown of Columbus statues in various places around the country. We've had some success with the mascot issue. There's a statewide ban in New York State for high schools using it. And look, I gotta say this right now: there is no debate on the mascot issue. The debate was over a long time ago. Every Native organization has taken a position against it. Every legitimate Native organization, every child development association, every psychological association, even the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. In spite of Trump claiming that somehow banning a mascot is a violation of civil rights, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights called for the ban and has done so for over 20 years. So there is no real debate. And I'm going to tell you something more. There's also no real major division amongst Native people on this. And I know Bill Maher just quoted the Annenberg poll once again because he's a moron. Let me be clear. If you do a phone poll and you just call random numbers and don't call Native communities, if you just call random numbers of Americans and ask them or ask who of them will identify as Native Americans, you're going to get plenty of them that do. They all have that same Cherokee great grandmother who must have got taken down by some white man and somehow has all these great grandchildren. And these people who claim to have this Cherokee great grandmother believe that they have the right to speak on Native issues. If you don't call Native people, then you're not polling Native people. If you call Americans, U.S. citizens, randomly, you are not talking to Native people. You may be talking to people who claim they have some Native ancestry that they can't prove. If they decide for the purpose of that phone call to identify themselves as Native Americans, doesn't mean that they are. So to be clear, there was no poll done by Annenberg that called Native people. They called American citizens and asked who of them identify as Native American, and then they segregated those who did to come up with their poll. They said, 90% of the Native Americans we polled. You didn't poll Native Americans. You polled Americans and then tried to isolate any of them who would claim to have Native ancestry. That's not the same thing. So to be clear, there was polling done by Berkeley, and what they did was they didn't exclusively call Native communities either, but they did call Native communities as well. And what they determined is the more a person who claimed to be Native was connected to community, in other words, lived in one, or their culture, the more they objected, the more they opposed Native mascots. And their number came in somewhere in the higher 70% were opposed to it. I would argue that the number of people who live on a Native territory who are connected to their culture, I'm not talking about somebody who might have an enrollment card but lives in Cambridge, New York, or anywhere, any other white community. I'm not saying they're not Native, but if they're not connected to community, If they don't, if they are a part of a community, if they are not a political, I mean, we get asked this question. Well, are Native Americans, are they just a race of Americans? No. We are a distinct political entity. I'm not saying that we all agree with each other politically, but we are not Americans, even if the United States claims that we are. Our distinction is not a distinction of race or long hair or darker skin. Some of us have some of those things, but that's not what defines us as Native people. What defines us as Native people is our connection to our culture, to our community, and to the political entities that we are. So I just had to be clear on that, because every time I hear some moron like Bill Maher, I know he's a high-paid television personality, but he still gets it wrong. And I've listened to Stephen A. Smith on.
He's pumped his ass.
Well, and a lot of these guys are. They hear this one thing that, the crazy part is most of these guys start saying, yeah, it's really wrong that these Native mascots exist. Then they say, but we learned that 90% of Native Americans support it. No, we don't. There is a group of frauds. They call themselves guardians. And what do they guard? They guard white people's use of Native mascots. The Native American Guardians Association, which is primarily a group of frauds and pretendians. Yes, that is a real word these days. They are a group of frauds and pretendians. Some of them may have Native ancestry, but they don't have Native cultural connections or community connections. What do? They serve one purpose, and that is to defend white people's right to mock Native people as for their mascots. That's what they do. They've never stood up for missing and murdered Indigenous women. They even stood with that little white boy who got all in the news from Covington Catholic School, or Catholic Covington School, or whatever it was called, in that standoff in Washington, D.C., about a decade ago. They even went and posed with pictures, not with Nathan Phillips, the Native guy, with the white boy. So, I mean, look, that's what these so-called guardians are. They're guarding white folks. They actually will defy and stand against Native people in a community that might be close to any of these schools. The Shinnecock and the Puspatuk, or the Unkachug in Long Island, that Guardians Association stands with white people against those people. So that's what. So when people say, well, but there is a Native organization that supports Native men, no, they aren't a Native organization. They aren't. And they don't represent any significant numbers. I mean, I think they tried to one time say they represented 80,000 Native people, which is absurd. It's just an absurd number for them to even throw out there. And they don't. They don't. So anyway, I just wanted to make people aware of the fact that there is no division. Every Native organization, whether it's the National Congress of the American Indian, not crazy about their name, the Native American Journalists Association, not crazy about their name either, or any of the nations that are federally recognized, state recognized, or not recognized, they've all either opposed through resolution or issued statements, or just generally have given some sort of taken some sort of position against Native mascots. They all have. All of them have. So just to be clear. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he believes that, that somehow we are being discriminated against by not being allowed to be used for mascots, which is an absurd position to take. So when I say that I think there could possibly be a connection between Trump taking over these museums and his position on the mascots, I don't think it's an exaggeration. I could see him using these museums to advance his mascot position. I honestly could see that happening. So again, the number to call is 212-209-2877. I do want to remind people that we are listener-supported radio. We count on you, the listener, to support WBAI and WPFW. So if you're listening to the show in New York City, I hope that you'll support WBAI. If you're listening online, if you're listening to this as a video that I post on YouTube or on Facebook after the fact, however you catch this show, I hope that you'll support WBAI and WPFW. These are the two stations that support having a Native voice on their airwaves. And WBAI has been doing it for a long time. I've been on this station for many years. I started out as a guest host for Teokas and Ghost Horse on First Voices. I covered for him as a interim host and producer for a year, and then I started doing my own show. So I am grateful to WBAI for giving me space on their broadcast grid, but I can't do it without you, the listener. So I ask that you support WBAI. Look, you can do so by becoming a buddy or going to the buddy website, which is buddy.wbai.org, and you can become a sustaining member of a Resistance Radio buddy, a BAI buddy, by offering 5, 10, 15, $20 a month, or do a one-time donation. But that's the website to go. You can follow the prompts to do whatever you can do, or you can call. You can call, and we have a number that we use some of the BIA letters in this thing. So it's 1-833-WBAI NYC. That's 1-833-WBAI NYC. If you want the numbers, it's 1-833-922-4692. And you can, again, donate by credit card or by your checking account or your debit card, whatever works for you. If you happen to call those numbers and you get an answer machine or voicemail, just leave your name and your number, and somebody will get back to you as soon as possible to make arrangements for you to support the station. So let me do that. Reggie, do we have anybody on the phone lines yet?
Well, it's funny you should say that, John, because we actually do have a caller waiting on queue.
All right, well, let's go ahead and do it. Caller, what I'm going to first, before I take you on the air, I ask that you turn down your radio. That's my standard instructions. You got to have the radio down because otherwise it doesn't come across very well. And then I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask you your name. Only need your first name just to be polite. And I'm going to ask you your name and where you're calling from. So, caller, you're up first. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Nick from Parsippany, New Jersey.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for calling in again. How you doing?
Yeah, hi. I got something interesting here for you. How does the Constitution, how does the domestic enemy equation, or when obvious corruption, like the violation, how does it kick in if the Congress and the courts are not addressing the corruption? And I would say that the only institution left would be the Army. If you look at the oath that the Army takes to all enemies, foreign and domestic, but because of our separation of the military from civilian issues, but what else is possible? And the corruption is so obvious. I'm sure in certain countries, the Army would just come in and purge the system and start all over. But how in the hell can we get rid of these people by our own Constitution?
Well, unfortunately, your Constitution's not going to save you here because, like with anything else, there's this level of discretion and discretionary use of authority to even oppose obscene authority like this. So I don't think the Constitution is going to protect. I think that people have to. I think people have to step up, and I don't know that you have a. I mean, obviously, at some point you could bring legal actions and that kind of stuff, but Trump has such control over the courts right now that becomes very, very difficult. So I just think there has to be. Look, what did you see in France? Didn't you? Were they the yellow? What were they? Yellow vest, green vest? What were they? What were they wearing, Reggie? Um, there was tens of thousands of people that were spilling onto the streets.
Yeah, it was the Yellow Vest movement, and it lasted. It really it lasted for like about 3 years, and it probably would have lasted to this very day if it wasn't for the pandemic.
Yeah. So look, people got to resist. And I'm not telling people exactly what to do because I can't do that. I can't do it on the air. But I will say that if you don't offer some level of resistance, I don't care if it's just violating curfew. If you don't offer something, but it just seems to me that people either are scared, lack courage in general, or they believe that somehow an answer to your question, that somebody's going to come up with an answer that's going to solve all this problem, and that they're going
Yeah,
to find it within their
the
constitution. I'm not sure they're
officer
going
corps of the
to.
United States Army.
Well, I mean, the United States Army is controlled by Trump. I mean, the Army's not going to
They
come in and
don't
take
have
on the
to be.
National
They
Guard.
take the oath to the Constitution first.
Well, unfortunately, I think the oath right now is to Donald Trump. I don't think that any of them. Look, I mean, Donald Trump took an oath too. What difference did that make? I mean, I just think that things are in a, things are in a really bad place. But you know what? It was going to happen this way. It's not like things like this haven't happened in American history before. Just nobody wants to teach it, right? And Trump is going to oppose teaching anything that even resembles any type of corruption or unseemliness of American history. So this is not the first time, and it may not even be the worst time. I mean, look, how many people? What did they say? 600,000 people died in the Civil War. I mean, and it wasn't just over slavery. It was primarily because of slavery, but it wasn't just over that. There was, I mean, the deep-seated hatred that developed between the North and the South.
And they settled it with the Army.
Well, but did they? Who was punished? Who was held up for treason? Not a single person. No one was held up for treason. Nobody was It's kind of like the people who murdered all those folks in Tulsa. Not one person was prosecuted. They were all given, basically they were cut a break. So I mean, look, it wasn't just the Army; it was armies. They were fighting. There was a war, and nobody was held accountable. And the people who died, they weren't the decision makers. They were just the ignorant stiffs like the rest of us, right? That's what they were, and they become victims of that
Army
power.
in the past sense. This would be a thing that the Army would do for the first time to get rid of the domestic enemy.
Who's the domestic enemy? I mean,
The
Trump,
government,
Trump
the
is
Trump
you,
administration, the corporation.
and that corporation controls the Army. Unfortunately, I think it's wishful thinking. But have you seen anybody within the current administration, including all his chiefs of staff and all these War Department, any of these guys, any of them who are opposing him? Crap, even the first time he was the elected, he had, what was it, Milley that was walking down the street, possibly trying to get him to use the Army as he approached that church in Washington D.C. Look, we know that the Army is not going to oppose the President of the United States. In fact, they are in a. I almost feel bad to some extent, because some of these people, the rank and file military, how much are they obligated to follow the commander in chief versus understand?
Lawful orders.
Well, again, I don't know. I think you raised some good
John,
questions,
take
though.
care of yourself.
All right, thanks for calling in, Nick. I appreciate it. Again, the number to call is 212-209-2877. Look, I hope that people realize the dangers that are happening right now. And look, as a Native person, I kind of sit back like the penguins on on a cartoon, just smile and wave, I mean, there's a part of me that watches some of this stuff just crumble and realize that it was built into the system. This kind of corruption, this potential for authoritarian rule. Look, from a Native standpoint, we've always been the victims of authoritarian rule. We were not being treated in any way that where the rules of law were protecting us. We weren't a part of the U.S. Constitution. We were excluded from all that. Yet, even though we were outside of it, there was always this ability for presidents and Congress and the courts to assert authoritarian rule over Native people. So now it's coming back to affect a lot of other people. And until Trump's base, until poor white folks, the ones who came out in droves to support Trump, until they start realizing how much this is working against them, we're going to continue to see more of the same. Again, numbers 209-2877. I don't know if we got another caller on the line there, Reggie, but
We do have another caller, John. I was just about to inform you, but you read my mind.
all right, go ahead. Who do we got next? Who's up and where you calling from?
My name is Connie Colvin, and I'm from Jackson Heights, Queens. And I want to say that I enjoy your program very much, and I'm in support of you. And I can tell you, I am so horrified by what's going on, I can't even begin to tell you. It's just, I mean, I keep thinking, Americans will wake up someday. Will they ever? Who knows? I just don't know.
I don't know. I don't know where the bottom is, I guess, and I think that's where the question lies: is where's the bottom on this thing? When do people say enough is enough? Because I think,
I know.
I mean, when I saw Harvard cave in to Trump on some of this stuff, I mean, and then Columbia, I mean, these are institutions that, frankly, we expect them to be to help us be on the front
Don't
lines.
these people know or understand? I mean, we now are a fascist country. People don't realize. They don't read. They don't think. I mean, Orwell warned us, 1984. That's what we're living in.
Well, and from a native perspective, I've been watching this Ukraine Russia thing, and as I hear Trump say that Ukraine is going to have to surrender some land to Russia for peace. You know, in native people, one of the words that we have that we developed for our word for treaty actually translated to just that. It translated, we give up lands for peace. Because that's what it always ended up. And how did that work out? We are literally living on postage stamp sized pieces of property compared to what we once occupied.
Oh yeah.
So anybody who suggests that Ukraine should surrender not just Crimea, but half of, I mean, what do they say? They're saying like 20% of the entire landmass is what Russia is trying to occupy and it wants to claim for their own. And the Trump administration is supporting that. So, I mean, he can talk a little bit tough as he wants to, but at the end of the day, frankly, even some of the European nations are saying, well, there may have to be some land swapping. Really, that's the solution. So you take somebody who invades a country, and the way you pursue peace is to give them what they invaded? Well, how is that justice? We're in strange times.
Look what's happening. Well, look at what's happening in Gaza.
There you go. Yeah. I mean,
that is the biggest disgrace. We're seeing a genocide right in front of our eyes, and not nearly as much enough is being done about it.
On a daily basis, Netanyahu is killing more children than Hitler did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a matter of numbers.
And in this country, we claim to love children. Well, hello. It's just ridiculous.
Well, apparently it's white children, because if you're children of color, then you basically take a different. I mean, let's keep in mind, slavery that existed for through the first 100 years of the United States, it was enslaved children too. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was having sex with his slaves, or one slave in particular, and the children of that sex slave relationship were also slaves. Now, there's some argument about whether he ultimately freed them or not, but they were born into slavery. This is U.S. history. That's why I say, I think people sometimes look at the current circumstance and think, how did we get here? You've always been here. The question is, you've been able to push back over time, but sometimes we don't push back enough. And like I said, I'm concerned about Trump taking over these museums. I mean, what are children of the future going to be learning about American history?
If there will be an America left.
Well, and my point with the Smithsonian is, obviously one of the solutions is for people, and frankly, I was hoping we'd see more of this with the Kennedys there, that people just quit. I would love to see those who Trump claims he's going to honor with the Kennedy Awards, which totally, defy the processes that have been used in the past. I wish most of the people would say no. Oh, hell no. I refuse to accept. I will not go. I mean, I suspect George Strait will, but I don't know. I mean, Sylvester Stallone, yeah, maybe he will too. But I mean, at some point, I've seen some mass exoduses from some of these institutions that Trump's trying to take over. But there has to be more. There has to be people who refuse, who just refuse to comply. And until that happens, we're going to see more. And I mean, every time Trump takes a step and doesn't meet an equal force resisting him, he's going to continue to take another step. That's just the way things work. Same thing with
And
Putin
examples
and Ukraine.
and examples have to be shown. I mean, it's like you can't fight resist you can't resist with a limp noodle. Okay? You can't resist with a brittle noodle.
Yeah.
You got to resist with something a little bit more harder and firmer. Figuratively,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes literally, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, and you also have to understand that, this is that definition of what they call asymmetric warfare, so to speak. You're not gonna
Yeah.
you're not gonna match their firepower. You're not gonna match.
No.
So you've got to make it up with human capital. And I'm not saying that we need to surrender ourselves or sacrifice ourselves. But look. How many times have we seen these Hollywood types show up at some sort of rally to be arrested and get slapped on the hands and go home? That's not an arrest. That's a demonstration. That's a publicity stunt. At some point, if
It was a photo op.
it's a photo op, exactly. I mean, how many times has Jane Fonda been arrested for crying out loud? I mean, come
Right.
on. And then tell me how many years she still served in jail. So I mean, again, not picking on Jane Fonda, but she came to mind, I guess. But I mean, at some point, there has to be the willingness, because here's the thing, if the adults today aren't prepared to step up, you're condemning your children. You are condemning your children to a future where they are not going to have, and I'm not talking about the financial opportunities you have, they are not going to have the freedoms, they are not going to have the education, they are not going to have so many of the things that you have been able to take advantage of. Sometimes at the expense of others, Native people in particular, but still, you're not even going to have that. But I'll tell you one place that you will see resistance. You're going to see resistance on native territories. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to go down there to defend the Smithsonian Institute, because frankly, they haven't exactly stepped up either over the years. Again, I've had decent relationships with the folks down in New York, not so much of the ones in Washington, and I hope that they find the guts to resist Trump's attempt to change what they are willing to put on display at these museums. That's all I can say.
Well, yeah, we do have another caller, John, but I just wanted to add what you just finished saying. I think at the end of the day, we have to realize that resistance, you have to fight for something. You have to defend something that you believe in, and again, we hear these rhetorical statements about, oh, well, fascism this, fascism that, and oh, this is happening now. This is unprecedented, and as you have just said,
Yeah, not so much.
folks don't know their history. People are not honest about what this country has been and continues to be. And to understand, and really, if you want to go deeper into the cracks, some of these folks are upset because they thought that they were equal to their leaders. And they found out that they weren't.
Well, and I got to say something else too. Anybody who thinks, well, we just got to get through these next 3 years. What makes you think it ends with Trump? I don't think Trump's going to live out his presidency, frankly. I mean, this is
I don't think so
an
either.
obese guy who's having some health problems that he's hiding, to most of the public. I don't think
his legs are swelled up.
I don't think he's going to last his term. But that doesn't mean what he's doing isn't going to last. The entire GOP is in his court. And J.D. Vance, he might be worse than Donald Trump. I mean, so look, one of the things that we could always count on with Donald Trump is that a certain level of ignorance. That many of us could
Yeah,
could
yeah,
could
yeah,
could at least
yeah.
drive our message home to. Some of these smarter guys, the ones who did that, what was that called, Project 2025 or whatever else. I mean,
Right.
these are guys who they had a plan, much better than any plan the Democrats have ever come up with. I mean, well, let me say,
And,
not better. I
and,
mean, more effective and more organized. Put it that way.
well, and let's be honest about this, John. This is Project 2025 is a compilation of bad ideas coming from the Heritage Foundation, which they were drafting this stuff going back into the early 70s.
Yeah, I mean,
And what
this thing got a whole lot of momentum when apparently
yeah.
a black guy got arrested as or got elected as the president. I vaguely remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I mean, look.
Although that same black guy did adhere to some of the things
Oh,
from
you
the
think?
Heritage.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
think? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
I know we have a caller, so
just wanted to
let me
point
go
out.
ahead and go to the caller. But I just
Yeah,
want
let's
people
do
to
that.
think. I don't want people to
Right.
think that this is just about surviving 3 more years. There has to
Long
be more
term,
than
we
that.
got to think long term.
Long game. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Kendall. I'm originally from Bed-Stuy, Georgia, and I'm currently in the Bronx.
Well, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
This is the first time I've called the studio, and I called you because I heard your conversation with a gentleman, and you misspoke. Agent Orange selling R, I can't say the last word, your public health radio, did not take an oath this time. The pictures of his inauguration, his hand was not on the Bible.
Well, I mean, and I don't know if it was or wasn't. I mean, but it almost. The fact of the matter is, he was confirmed as taking an oath, whether he did or not, by the Supreme Court justice. So, and he did the first time, even if he didn't this last time. So, but I agree, and I don't know. Frankly, you don't need a Bible to take an oath. As a Native person, I've been in court, and I can affirm to tell the truth, and I can affirm to adhere to certain things, whether my hand sits on a Bible or not. So, I understand what you're saying, though. And look, Trump is always going to screw things up. He's always going to do something that is not appropriate, and that wouldn't surprise me that was one of the inappropriate, faux pas, as they say. So, yeah, go ahead.
But I'm
Anything
not sure
more?
whether he's supposed to have his hand on the Bible or not when he supposedly takes the oath. So
Yeah, I
he's
don't
supposed to
know.
have his hand on the Bible when he takes the oath.
Yeah,
He didn't take the oath.
I'm not a big Bible person, so I'm not sure if that's necessarily required. It doesn't mean that he still shouldn't be able to be held accountable. The problem is most of the right, and frankly, even a lot of people on the left will refuse to hold him accountable. So, at least people who are elected. And I think there's almost a certain level of trying to protect the office of the presidency so much that I think there's some apprehension to hold them accountable, and I think the left is partially responsible for that as well. They claim
The
they don't.
supposed left.
Yeah, the supposed left. Well, and I say left, but because
I
I
know,
don't
I
know if
know.
there's
I
any.
just I'm being a little petty on that one.
Well, I don't
So
know if there's any left, but so yeah, but well, Kendall, I appreciate you're calling in, and that's probably a decent observation. You're probably right, and the fact of the matter is, he may believe that he's not bound to honor the Constitution because of the way he supposedly avoided the oath. He may believe that. I mean, so who the hell knows? I mean, who the hell knows? If we got another caller, Reggie, we'll try to get one more in before we go. Oh,
yes, we do. Yes, we do. And this person is on the air right now.
caller, go ahead. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello,
Hey,
is that me?
yeah,
That
that's
is you.
Yeah, Bob from Brooklyn.
Hey, Bob, thanks
First
for
of all,
calling.
Pretty good. Real quick, Reggie, there seems to really be, and you've heard this before, there is a difficulty getting into the lines. And
Yeah,
you're
we're
the
aware.
technical guy, but-
Yeah, it's the phone system. We know. We're aware about that. It's going to take some money in order to fix that.
Okay.
But we're aware.
Okay. I wanted to address the gentleman whose call you fielded first with regard to the military and its involvement in the issues at hand. There's always been a tradition in this country for the military not to be involved in the affairs of government.
Right.
And I don't have to tell you, as a person who reads, what the historical backgrounds for that are. I think, however, what people really need to do is become familiar with the instances wherein the military is authorized to interact with government and law enforcement. And those provisions are dictated by the Posse Comitatus Act of, I think, 1870-something. It was post-Reconstruction, and the Insurrection Act. With regard to whether or not the military or the leaders of the military are going to be responsible, Trump has very strategically cut the head off of the snake. All the old guys who were in there who might have been responsible have been dismissed.
Right. Well, and one of the challenges is who decides what is and isn't an insurrection. I mean, if there's nobody, I mean, if he's got the courts in his pocket, the Supreme Court in particular, I mean, it makes it really difficult to say that he has violated, the abuse of his office by utilizing. Certainly, we know the National Guard can be used for domestic circumstances, and frankly, ever since the
National Guard, and again, I refer to this Posse Comitatus. Yes, the National Guard can be, but you have to now draw the line between whether they're federalized or not federalized, and that's a whole other issue.
Well, and I think because D.C. is a bit of a unique situation, he was able to pull this thing off. But what happens when he went to Los Angeles? And even if it gets challenged in court, and ultimately he is found to have violated something, what does that even mean? Nothing happens to a sitting president. So it's a really strange situation.
Los Angeles and D.C. are two distinct and unique circumstances. First of all, he called in the Marines, which everyone's eyebrows raised when that happened. Posse Comitatus does not apply to the Navy and the Marines.
Yeah, so he's got advisors who know how to manipulate this stuff, right?
Yeah, he's threading the needle.
Yeah, exactly.
He really is, and again, I would ask that you repeat the name of the film that you talked about initially. I didn't get a chance to jot that down.
Well, the first word is a Mohawk word, but it's called Gunazadage, 270 Years of Resistance. If you look up the Oka crisis, if you just search Oka, O-K-A crisis documentary, it'll be one of the ones that's listed. I can spell Gunazadage. It's K-A-N-E. That's same as my last name. K-A-N-E-H-S-A-T-A-K-E. That's Gunazadage. I know that's a tough one, but Gunazadage, 270 years of resistance.
I'm going to have to listen to the archives for that. But
again, just search Oka crisis, and you're going to see Native people resist the Canadian Army invading a Mohawk community. I mean, most people, again, completely unaware that this actually happened, but it did happen. It's American history. It's Canadian history. Frankly, I understood that SEALs were deployed. U.S. Navy SEALs were deployed in support of the Canadian military during that period of time. But that's again a little known fact. Bob, I want to thank you for calling. I want to thank all of you for calling. I appreciate the participation of callers on the program. We're going to be back next week, and who the hell knows what we'll have to talk about next week. I do want to remind people, The Long Hope is a documentary that I just finished producing, and I will be doing some screenings in New York in various places. And stay tuned for when those screenings. And the screenings originally will be screenings, not premieres. So I will probably create an invitation list for people to come and see this film. I think it is an educational film, the likes of which you have never seen before. So come out and join me for that when the time comes. I'm John Kane. This is Resistance Radio. I want to thank you for listening. Yahweh.